Hi, everybody. Steve Cady here at Bowling Green State University and our doctorate in organization development and change, our master in organization development and change program. And Happy New Year. I'm just so glad that everybody's here. And Carol, this is a great group that has shown up to be with you today. It's such a testament to who you are and all that you know and what you've been sharing. So I think that's just fantastic. Our doctoral program, which Carol is very involved with and a very important part of, our doctorate program, and we have several of our students here and graduates who are here. Our doctorate program is focused on professional joy. And what does that mean? It's focused on helping people through their expertise, through their thought leadership, to develop thought leadership in the human centered areas and professions. And as they develop their thought leadership in these areas and develop their skills in organization development and change, and they put their ideas out there, they begin to make a difference in people's lives. What I like to say is passive difference making. That is, every word that's out there, when someone's reading your words or listening to this recording down the road, and they're benefiting from this, and Carol's off in Mexico or somewhere having a good time, she's making a difference while she's hanging out or while she's sleeping, because we're recording this and we're sharing her knowledge. And our doctoral program is all about that. It's about giving people the opportunity to share what they know and create knowledge around what they're passionate about and that difference they want to see in the world, transforming organizations, revitalizing communities, and developing human potential. And so that's what our program's about. And I'm just really glad that you're a part of the program, Carol, and I'm really grateful for that. And everybody that's here, there's new friends that are here, a lot of old friends that are here. I'm just so glad that you all are here for this with Carol. Carol, as we jump into your topic, I just wanted to ask you a question, and I'm going to turn it over to you, but we'll use this as a segue into your question. I find you to be, like I talk about, my word for you is wonderful, right? You're full of wonder. Your questions are always built on this notion of wonder and curiosity. And that's how you explore everything that you get into, which I think is fantastic. It's energizing. And I just love having conversations with you because you're so inquisitive and just so full of that wonder and curiosity in what you do. So, my question for you is this. I would love for you to, if you can think of a story that really helps us connect with this topic today. A story that helps us know why this topic matters. Was there a moment in time where something happened that really anchors you in, I want to do something about this and I want to bring this out into the world? Okay, that story is a story I'd love to hear you share. And then after you share the story, just take us into your talk, okay?
Well, that is my talk.
Okay, well, can you tell us the story? Can you tell us maybe a secondary story or a snippet of the story and then more of it later? But can you give us a little bit of that?
I started my career, as many of you know, as an IT person. And I found myself very often at the intersection between the people and the professional IT people. And the moment that led me to this was when we implemented a groupware application that was supposed to help people collaborate, and there was no data in it. And the question is, how do you engage people in collaborative technology when they don't know how or don't want to collaborate? That was the moment.
That's great. And well, and that take us into your talk.
Okay,
Guess that's
so
my cue.
that's your cue. I need the slides. They're just sort of to guide a conversation. If you have questions that are relevant and need to be answered right away, interrupt. Otherwise, put them in the chat and we'll do something about them later. So overall, before I say anything else, I want to thank Steve for creating this program and inviting me into it. I want to really thank Mike Zicker, who encouraged me and voluntold me to do this presentation because it really gave me a way to look at the arc, which turns out to be 30 years. And all the faculty, students, admin, alum, colleagues, and friends who have been part of this inquiry with me for whatever amount of time and make this work possible. So that's where I need to start. And where I see it as the highlight is cohort learning is what's important. But cohorts are individual people who come together for a reason. And my interest is how you turn a cohort into a learning community or work with a group of people, a team, a class, obviously a cohort, and they create more than whatever they as an individual are looking for. In this case, it's a terminal degree. But everybody who's been through the program will tell you that they got much more than a degree out of it. And that's what my purpose of telling the story is. So the beginning of the story is that the very first cohort had a couple of webinars, and then they met for the first time for the first residency, which was 4 days. And at the end in the checkout, one of the students said, "You know, when I left my home, my wife asked me an interesting question. Are you going to make friends?" And I pretty adamantly said, "No, that's not what I'm going there for." And now when I go back to my wife, I'm going to have to say, "You know, after this, I think I've made 15 friends that I'm going to have for life." And I believe that that's central to the work and joy that comes out of working in a learning community and has definitely been proven in this experience of 5 cohorts about to have graduated in August. So at the end of that residency, the cohort named themselves Trailblazers. And when the next residency came, one of the students who became the connector and the glue, and there seems to be one in every cohort, had a rock made and distributed to everybody. And we all still have them. And the front of it says all in, and the back is D.ODC, BGSU. I find that very inspiring. And at the end of cohort 1, and just as a statistics, cohort 1 had 12 people in it, 13 people in it. 7 graduated in August, 3 years, 5 in December, and 1 is still working on her dissertation. She had 3 babies. And this is an artifact that they created to talk about what their values and their goals were. If you can imagine, if you can dream, you can achieve it, and you can become. And I think that's central to the program. So, Ryan, next slide, please. So I just told you the Genesis story. It was working in an investment bank. We were bringing cultures together, and we were using groupware, which had just begun, in order to create the culture. And what the senior bankers wanted was what became a CRM system, but they didn't want to give their own data. And that led me to my question. How do you get people to use collaborative technology when they don't want to collaborate? And that's actually the through line that began and continues to challenge me and us. The next slide, Brian. So ultimately, I realized that I wanted to help people to learn who were not like the investment bankers I worked with, who were born with silver spoons in their mouths, and went back to school to learn more about how adults learn and got a doctorate in basically organizational learning, human and organizational studies. And I went really with the question that I just told you. The research question, as many of us learn, isn't really what you go in with. And it morphed into what are the minimal elegant conditions that enable a group, team, cohort, or class to become a learning community. And I would say that's still a question that I'm grappling with. But during my research, I found myself, I need the next slide so that people can see this part, doing the normal research and doing lit review. And it ended up in 3 buckets. The one that I was focused on and started with was organizational learning, and it came from a sociological perspective. And it went through Sangi's organizational learning or learning organizations. That was very big grounding that's continued. The more impactful in the long term was being exposed to socio-technical systems. And an extension of that was the collaborative design and the collaborative methods work, which is central to the D.ODC program. And then I found myself understanding what I had done as a practitioner, where I was always an insider doing a developmental evaluation or assessing projects. So I got deeply involved in participative action research with practitioners and first, second, and third person research, where I was part of the research. I researched with others who were in the teams and the groups that I was working with. And then we had the traditional third person, which was measurable, often statistics and metrics. And that's the core constructs of how I've always done the work. The dissertation was complete in 2000. I used the theory base that I just spoke about. It's actually, in my mind, a lineage. And I came out with a very interesting formula that I think is the central piece of it. And I didn't have to write a 250-page dissertation to come up with this. So bear with me. The beginning of it is performance plus learning equals a result. And in corporate life, learning was really training. And if things were good, or I was in a company that had large budgets, they put a lot of money into training. And if things went bad, it was a good way to cut costs easily, and training was reduced. And for a little while, no, nothing was affected. And then one day, things were not going so well, and they decided to go to the training department and add more training. But if you looked at what I was coming up with, structures and sense making that contributed to learning, and you changed the equation to performance times learning, and worst case scenario, learning became 0. And more narrowly, if you took training out altogether, over time, you cannot sustain performance. and especially if performance is measured in metrics. So this is what has driven me and focusing on the learning ever since. The end of the dissertation was what everybody hopes for. And I got to publish this book with two colleagues of mine. And the beginning is really the dissertation itself, in pretty lay terms. And then there are 10 or 12 case studies of knowledge management that follow the principles of structures and sense making. And I'm going to fast forward and say what's really the new piece of it is the enormous importance of relationships. And that's where I'm spending most of my academic time, is looking at how the relationships, and there's a new field or process that Jody Hoffer-Gittel started on relational coordination that I think is very central to the extension of this work. So the real crux of this is the D.ODC program that was actually approved in 2018 and began in 2019. And it took a long time for it to be designed and approved by the state. It is an enormously innovative program in that it literally, in the language of the program, talks about learning communities. So that was what intrigued me. And the most innovative part for me was the intention of having lots of support for people who were returning to school. The average age was 48, and were successful in their profession and wanted to add research skills. And for me, that was really important because I did both my MBA and my doctorate that way. And I deeply believe in that form of education. So luck had it, or divine intervention, I met Steve just as this was about to happen. And he invited me to be there from the beginning. And I have followed the first cohort intensely. And ever since then have been involved more or less with all the cohorts, and specifically the instructor of record for the third year dissertation success program, which is really unique in the field and has specific residencies for all the students who are in that year, completely geared to helping them in whatever way is relevant to finish their dissertations. So it's not content specific because everybody's at a different point in time, but it's very much designed so that the students help each other and the faculty is there to support. It's an interesting dynamic because obviously the chair is responsible for the results of the dissertation, but all these supports are critical to the success. And my hypothesis, which so far has been proven, is that assuming you have these support, you're going to have a much higher rate of completion and less ABDs, which is what's really important to the university. And people help each other and find lots of common ground so that there's a lot more impact, and relevance and rigor are buzzwords now, particularly in the Academy of Management, that says if research isn't rigorous and relevant, then it's not really useful research. Really important. So that's the story of 2019 to 2025 as I can tell it. And that's the core of how I've applied everything that came before it and intend to continue doing this to add to the knowledge of what really makes a learning community work. So where am I going from here? I have an ambitious research agenda. I am in the process of writing the Cohort 1 story. I know people don't believe it's coming, but it will come this year. And it's a combination of my experience, which is in many, many, many notebooks, as data and my reflections, a story that's being written by a member of the cohort, collecting information from peers, and some third-person analysis of how the program has changed and some data about how it moved forward. I'm intending to do an IRB-approved study of cohorts 1 through 5 with other faculty. I'm not going to do this alone. And there's a history of the field project that I'm doing with a cohort 6 member, Sean Otto. And we built a 7 by 10 foot wall of 100 years of the history of OD, and it needs a lot of expansion. And my fantasy is to support alum in continuing to learn and support each other to publish, because that's one of the goals of the program. So I'm going to be a busy lady. And now we can talk as a group, and it's possible to do breakout rooms, but I think I'd rather hear questions and see what's happening in your minds and in your hearts right now.
Carol, could you give us more illustration of the support aspect? Because you emphasized that that's what's bringing people all the way through. What typically we say, well, we've got plenty of research support here at the university. They can go to the library, they can go here, there. But I don't think that's all you mean. I think it's internal to the cohort. What do they do as support that's getting them these great results?
That's a wonderful question, and that's one of the things I really want to do my research on. But from what I know now, there are two parts. There's the formal and the informal. What's become very interesting to me is when I speak to people who took traditional doctoral programs who finished, almost everybody talks about a small group that they work with, their study group, but they were all formed informally through friendships and not encouraged or promoted by the program. That's the first thing. By literally, besides the scheduled third year, there is all kinds of encouragements along the way. And the program does a great deal of having group projects so that they already get to know each other. Getting through this program, if you're not comfortable working in a cohort, it's probably not a good place for you. So the support itself is partially in the design. The student chooses their faculty, chair and their committee. And there is no question that that's the relationship that is responsible for getting you through the academic part. The support that comes from the community of students and from, I would argue, the third year residencies is a social support that is conscious. That to me is the differentiator. The students in every cohort have all had a back channel that I don't think any of the professors are part of, and I know I have never been part of. And there's usually a link. Like if I want to get something really to get out there, I go to the person who's intimately involved with the WhatsApp group, or in the old days, it was Slack groups, and it comes back instantly. That doesn't happen through the formal mechanisms. But the real answer to your question is that the third year is designed for support. So I ask people before the residency, what do they need? And then each residency and each cohort is designed individually. It's not a course that keeps going in the same way. And core to the residencies is each student does an update of where they are, ideally with their chair present and their peers. And a lot of real deep change and progress is made through that level of support. And over time, to my surprise, more and more students are using that as time to be by themselves and write, because these are working professionals. They don't usually get 3 days to focus. So my belief is that they move through at a pace by supporting each other that wouldn't necessarily happen to everybody if they were doing this on their own. This is what I want to prove.
That's great.
You know what might be interesting, Carol, is if we could do a chatterfall, if you're up for it, in terms of if everybody could just think, what's the one thing you're curious about? And I think we also have a lot of students that have been a part of the program and people that have been a part of this that might be able to reflect on an answer. So if you all want to chime in, maybe put something in the chat so Carol can bring you in and say, hey, come in and share your story, or something like that. Keith has a question here. Keith, do you want to come in and bring your question in and your thought?
And we should go back to the gallery to see.
Yeah, I'm here now. Just I use a rule of thumb, or always with any group that's going to continue to be together, 3 things are involved in a design. One is the first part of any greeting is just relationship oriented. Like, what are you doing? Who are you? And a 90-minute segment, I'd spend 30 minutes on that, a long time, pretty long time, at least enough to have people close triangles. Hey, Carol, do you know Mike and Dave, and they're doing that, and whatever those things are. And second part is getting and giving help. So if you're middle of a dissertation, like, you have specific things you want to get help with, and whatever methodology you want to use, it's giving and getting help, and that's the expectation. And I'd spend 30 minutes on that. These are my min specs. And then the third thing, and I'm curious about your response. The third thing is, let's all experience something we haven't experienced before that's new, that we is going to be on some kind of edge, or you hope that it is. It's something that everybody is experiencing together and can have input on and shape. And those are my min specs for a learning group. And some of the goals that you have for a group to stick with their work and be together and do all the good things that you want seem to have happened for me over many years because I have that in the back of my mind. So, comment on that. I don't know. No,
Yeah.
you're a pro.
Well,
So, and if I could offer, Carol, that Keith's work, if you don't know Keith's work at Liberating Structures, just go to liberatingstructures.com. And it's not a sales pitch as much as I want you all to benefit from what he's offered and his passive difference making in the world through his work and the site are a lot of techniques that help people build community and feel connected. And one of the things that I think when I watch Carol doing the work through the whole course of the 3 years, and the key thing is you build a lot of little microstructures throughout the whole experience that create connection that address those three things that Keith just mentioned. Where do you get help? How can you ask for help? How do you connect with others? How do you, those kinds of things. And we do what's intensive advising and those things. So it's really about helping the community help itself. I think one of the other things that's really key, without a doubt, building a learning community is the design team. Carol does a lot of iteratively engaging with the students about what they need in the experience to help make it work. That is critical to creating the environment. But Carol, I would put it over to the chat. And what are you all curious about? What are some things you specifically want to know about to help you as you think about the learning communities? And what brought you here today? What was that thing you wanted to get a little nugget around, that challenge you were facing, that if it was answered here today, it would help you?
We've got a
Could you all
couple
pose?
questions, in
Yeah,
the chat that
yeah. If
we
you
can
could
there are
pull
pull
up.
them
some
in.
very good things in the chat. You
Yeah,
want
so pull
either
them in and
Mark
pull the
or
people
Julia?
in.
Yeah, so one, Megan was asking about, and a couple others too. I think we're interested in any preliminary data that you've got that you can share. And some of the let's see, Megan's asking also about, the size of the cohort, some of the different variables. And then Magda was looking at, cohort learning and micro credentialing when you don't have a 3-year experience. You have these shorter micro credentials that are so popular today. What are your thoughts on applying these concepts to that type of environment?
So I'm going to go one step away from that and answer Mike Zicker's question first, because I think it's relevant. His question was, what did I learn from this role that would have applied to my IT life? And I think my answer to that, which is probably strange to hear, Mike, is that I think my IT role taught me many of the things that allow me to be in this role, because that's the interface between disciplines, and the glue is the people. And that's what OD and organizational learning, which was my discipline starting point, are all about. And in IT, people say things like, I literally had this happen when I was a new manager. If you'd only get the users not to bother me, I could do my job. And I would say to them, well, if I get the users to go away, do you think you'd have a job? And they'd look at me like, what are you talking about? So I think the question I would throw back to Keith is, what do you do with those min conditions, which are right, when people don't want to spend the time doing that? They think that it's all metrics and tasks. And that's a really tough one. That I'd be curious. I know we could have a conversation about that elsewhere. I want to answer Megan's question. The data is fascinating. the number of people in the cohort until cohort 6 has been pretty stable. 15 in cohort 6, I think, started with 21. And the faculty says that it's really hard to teach courses with 21 people and have all those things to grade and be personally involved with. I haven't had that cohort. The data in what I've done in metrics since cohort 3 has said that the residencies, the courses, the support of the third year is what's getting them through. And the most significant part of it is the interrelationship with each other. Do you have any more specifics, Megan? Is that directionally what you're looking for?
I'll just answer here. Excuse me. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm definitely really curious about what you're uncovering as you're going through the process, and was intrigued by the concept of the informal social network support. And then I had a selfish question at the end about if you were uncovering anything about, I called it traumatic events. For example, we were the COVID cohort. Are you seeing connections between events like that, the connection or challenges with that? Have you uncovered anything there?
There's a through line. And as you remember, in your cohort and cohort 1, we had charts on the wall in the residencies that said what were the things outside school, what was the important thing in the cohort itself, and what was personally important. And those charts are invaluable because there's more data in what was happening outside and personal. And what is shocking but shouldn't be is because these are working professionals, the average age is 48. The number of life challenges that people have navigated having full-time jobs and many people with families is mind-boggling. And the logic, or not the logic, the explanation, which I can't prove, is that I believe it's the cohort support that has gotten people through. And that's why I want to do an IRB approved study, because I want to really document that. There's subgroups in each cohort. There's no question about that. But I think everybody would say that the support of each other, as opposed to the support of the program and the faculty, is what got them through.
Thank you, and I'll be quiet now. I'll schedule a meeting with you sometime.
Over a bottle of wine, please.
I think David Harkins wants to say something, I think building off what you said, and I think Ryan has his hand up too. But David's was a part of that cohort that you talked about, so I suspect he wants to chime in with that perspective.
Thank you. Building on what you were talking about, Megan, I mean, cohort 1 had 2 maybe in-person meetings, and then we were completely offline, or we were online doing residencies during COVID for the better part of maybe a little more than a year before we all got back together again. And what I think is most interesting is how those back channels worked in that particular environment, and maybe in yours as well. But we're extraordinarily close cohort because we maintained those relationships even when we couldn't meet in person at residencies. So and we were in class together, and the classes sometimes were asynchronous, sometimes they were synchronous, depending on who the instructor was. But we didn't get to physically see each other a lot, but we were able to maintain a closeness which continues today, some 5-6 years after we started together. So that's a really interesting dynamic, I think. And I'll out myself, Carol. I was the story she told at the beginning. That was me. I was the one who said, I'm not going, this is very transactional for me. I'm going for the purposes of getting an education. I have no intention of making any new friends. I mean, I knew I would make them in an ancillary way, but I came back with truly some of the closest friends that I have. So that's a testament to the program and to the design and to the back channels and to the faculty and all of those things that we're talking about here.
Oh, Megan, I love your comment about collective resilience. Not surprising since your dissertation was on resilience.
You know, and I know some other people will chime in. I just wanted to throw into the mix this notion of intentionally putting in the tools, the smallest of little teeny tools, planting them intentionally at different points in time that support the larger ecosystem. So, for example, encouraging each cohort to start a WhatsApp, and just making that statement, hey, you all might want a WhatsApp. I'm not going to be a part of it, but it's done every single cohort as a small little touch, and then saying, I'm not going to be a part of it. It's for you all. And my suggestion is that you develop an agreement on how you want to keep it a healthy communication channel, and helping them to build their own learning community contract, so to speak, about what they want to achieve, what kind of cohort they want to be. What's happened in more recently, and Juliet's here, wave Juliet. You can wave. There's Juliet. She's at the Tavistock Institute. What I've grown to really appreciate, and we've brought in because we go over and spend time with them over there with the group, is this notion of the action research question. Asking the group, what's the question you want to explore about yourself as a learning community throughout the entire process? So that's evolved. That's not what we learned this. We're learning as we go. So with this new cohort coming in, they've created a action learning question about wanting to explore themselves as a cohort. And we just spent last week, after the first semester, reflecting on that question and using it to inform an agreement about what do they envision for themselves as a learning community. What do they want to achieve? How do they want to work together? And what do they do when they have challenges? And they're putting that together. And we've done it a little bit with each cohort, but more and more explicitly as we go. But building in these intentional steps and pieces, I think, is key.
Yeah.
Jillian, call somebody else. You're the bringer in them.
I am. I'm looking. There is so much great stuff. There's a lot of questions about advice to the PhD students, doctoral students working, full time, and some folks have been sharing that in the chat updates. I think I'll just take the floor since I have the mic open and the power, I guess, is that, I think this program, the structure of the program is really helpful for that. So, the 7-week classes, one class kind of focused at a time does make that more manageable. I'm a student in cohort 6, so that's my background. All right, let's see what else.
David Fearon also had his hand up.
David, yeah, go ahead. I'm gonna keep looking at that.
It just occurred to me the elegance, to use a word I saw earlier, that each cohort studying organization development is developing the organization within which they're going to succeed as learners. And so when you talk about adjusting this and back channels and all that, those are elements of keeping the organization sustainable, not just to the point they graduate, but we have some people here who are in the first cohort. That's a long sustainable. And really mainly what's sustained is the feeling we are still a cohort. We are still our organization after all these years. So laboratory, you've got it right there. You build great organization within your organization development program.
Teo, I've got you there.
Thank you. It's really awesome to see so many people from the cohorts that Carol is investigating here on my screen. I've been somewhat uniquely blessed in that I've seen some portions of their journey. For example, David was sharing about how, COVID was a challenge. We tried to be really intentional as to how we would support those connections on Zoom, and I got to be part of sort of the technical side of those things. At the risk of making it very obvious that I'm also somebody who is concerned with recruiting for our wonderful graduate programs at BGSU in organization development and change. I think one of the things that deserves maybe a mention is that the intention and heritage of the building a good cohort into a learning community comes from our master's in organization development and change, which has been around as a cohort program for decades prior to the D.ODC program starting. And so we were able to lean into insights and learnings from that rich history of how, we've seen things work really well and some things work not so well, and we're able to sort of take those learnings into the intentionality of the D.ODC program. And I love to see the intersection of folks in like current master's students looking at the doctoral students and the research that they're doing to inspire their own work, and sometimes vice versa.
That's great. And if I could just call on one person, I see Mary is also wants to say something. Just call on one person, and you can pass and come back after Mary if you want, Jennifer. Or maybe I'll just do Mary and then you, Jennifer. So Jennifer is one of the graduates of our program and was also vice president, I believe, for belonging at the university at the time. She's now at the Toledo Museum of Art doing the same kind of work and more, and has a lot of expertise in this notion of creating a community of belonging. And so let Mary bring her comment in, but Jennifer, I'd love for you to come in after Mary and just talk a little bit about when you look at it through the science and the lens of belonging and community. What were some of the critical things that you see in building a learning community that are really important? Maybe some examples that you experienced, and maybe even some things that could be done better that you saw that could be tweaked, because we created a belonging score for our program, and Jennifer helped us with that, or Dr. McCary helped us with that. And we had a belonging score at the cohort level, college level, and university level. And the closer we got to home, you know what the score did, right? It went up. They felt more belonging as they got closer to their cohort. How do you feeling of belonging, but building that scale and also things to create that. But that was a really important part of us really trying to, and I asked Jennifer to help us to build a strategy for belonging in the program to intentionally do it. I think it's all about being intentional. Really, that's key. But Mary, why don't you jump in and then maybe we can pop over to Dr. McCary over here.
Okay, so I have a non-academic comment. I know Carol from many, many years. I am not in academia. I only have a master's, but I teach part-time, and I've been teaching a 7-week project management class for about 8 years. And it before COVID, when we would meet in the lab every week for 3 hours, before the class, during the breaks, people got to know each other and built this community outside, because they're all adults. They're going back to learn project management, but they on their own built a community of who they were going to communicate with between the classes and who was going to give them help. Since COVID, we've been online, and we still stay online because, in fact, many people from non-New York are in this class now. So NYU has chosen to keep it online, which I'm grateful for because I don't have to schlep. But we don't have that. Nobody gets to know each other. And so that sharing of different experiences is not there. And it's, in that sense, it's kind of a different class.
And that's great. And building on that, and Jennifer, the thing we also do is we meet once a month on the same day, every month, the entire time, starting 5 months before the cohort gets together the fall semester. And we say, you're the third Thursday of every month at this time, rain or shine, we're there. And we use it as a touch point. That's another intentional thing to do. And sometimes it becomes very attended, sometimes not. but we definitely block the time, just like today. This is that time. This is an open time for us to do the open part. But Jennifer, you want to share a little bit?
Hey everyone, I'm Jennifer. I was part of cohort 2, as I think was mentioned. Good to see so many folks. And Dr. Katie is right. Like there was an intention at the onset for building a community of belonging, and a lot of us were really thinking about how to do that. It really started with him, but then others were really thinking about how to do that. And a big part of it, just like when you think about cohort hiring, I'm also like in the HR space, cohort hiring is typically more successful than bringing individuals in. It was really important to get cohorts connected right away and to try to build those bonds. And so it's not surprising to hear my cohort colleague Megan mention, the COVID experience, or for David to mention the COVID experience, because the cohorts had to be more intentional about how to build those connections. But then it's also about connection to faculty, connection to the university community, because the reality is some folks were looking for some sort of connection to BGSU itself. It was different than you would think for an undergraduate or graduate experience, but the way that the program started to think about that was to host more events where you could get to know people across campus and invite them in. The structured routines was another big part of it. So those meetings and knowing that there were certain things that were always going to happen, those things help to build identity, and identity helps to shape belonging. And so the more that you identified with the program, the more that you were going to connect and be able to feel like you belong to the program too. Another big thing that came up, and we never named it this, but it was definitely a part of it, was psychological safety. And so the more that you started to work on those trust norms, and the more that you started to work on building psychological safety and resilience, going back to some of the research I've seen a couple of folks in the chat chatting about, like those were the things that were helping. So diverse perspectives were really important, and getting people who weren't used to speaking up, finding voice was something that was important to belonging, because then you're starting to also see retention strategies. And so we were seeing a pretty steep drop off in the pandemic years because the economy changed. And ironically, we're in the same position for different reasons now. But it's important to be sure that people feel like their voices matter within the cohort in the program, and that they're respected and valued, even if they're bringing something different. And as they do that, then they still feel like there's a place for them within community. Otherwise, people start to really feel like their participation wasn't meaningful. And then you start to question, is the value worth it? And it just takes you down a rabbit hole. So those were some of the main things that I can think of. I know that there was a lot more, but the one thing that I know, when I finished up, I got the chance to do the speech for graduation, and one of the things that I really pushed on was more inclusive pedagogy within the program. I'm not sure where that is, but it's the only other thing I can think of in terms of belonging, that we're teaching people to be more culturally responsive. And so since all of us do work full time, the majority of people, and Carol did such a phenomenal job, but I also saw in the chat that she mentioned that most people do work full-time. Balance is always a part of the discussion, but in thinking about how we shape organizational cultures, it's also really important to also think about inclusion and cultural responsiveness. And so that's my quick spiel. But the program did so much, and I'm sure from everything I've heard continues to do that to shape belonging.
That's great. Carol, what do you think?
I feel blessed.
Well, are we getting to time to wrap up? So why don't we bring it back to Carol? And Carol, if you were to make your wish list for all of us, for all people going out there and doing this work, and you were to say, hey, just make sure you do these things, do these 3 things. Just make sure you do these 3 things, and the rest kind of will take care of itself. Do you have your favorite 3 things you'd like to leave us with today?
Encourage dialogue. Be kind. And take care of yourself so that you can serve others.
Mm-hmm.
And continuously learn.
Yeah. And for everybody out there, if you could, what's a nugget you're taking away? Something you appreciate, something that you got from today that that helped you address your question. Could you put that in the chat right now? And as a little present to Carol, in terms of a little parting gift of nuggets of gold that you're taking with you. Yeah, I think that if I've learned anything, I think it's a real, when I watch Carol and how she works with everybody, it's a real spirit of inquiry, a real spirit of listening. And I think also, what helps Carol to be successful is grace. Not her giving grace, but receiving grace. I think anybody who's trying to hold a container for someone, I think it's not all their responsibility. I think it's the whole group and community's responsibility to create a container, and they need to be equally as responsible for supporting that person who's stepping into that hot seat and creating the space for everybody to be together. And some grace is needed, because the only way to innovate is to try, and the only way to try is to fail and to not get it right. And I think when Carol, I see her excel the best is when she's in a dialogue where there's grace from the container, and she has the ability to respond and continuously adjust and continue the dialogue on what's being adjusted. Carol, I really appreciate both sides of the coin. Great, wonderful questioning, inquisitiveness, but also your ability to hold the space in the container for a learning community. So with that, I think we're done for today, aren't we? It's been a really nice conversation. Please leave your wonderful comments for Carol in the chat. We'll say goodbye. We'll hang out and have a little post-log conversation with Carol for those that want to stay. And we'll open up the gallery and just have a nice conversation. Anybody wants to stay behind. But at this moment, bye for now and have a great day, everybody. Thank you.